Why hello there, I'm Anus from Anus Tech Tips. Today we're going to be trying a beautiful, exclusive, never seen before Unreal Engine 6 demo running at a cutting edge resolution of 1920 by 1080 at an unbelievable 60 frames per second. Now, we're going to need the best of the best for this, so we're running this demo on an RTX 5090, and as you can see here, we're only getting 5 or 6 frames per second at our target resolution. But that's okay. First we'll render at a quarter the resolution, that being 480 by 270. Then DLSS 4 kicks in and upscales that to a beautiful 1080p. But we're still only getting 15 frames per second here, so we're going to let DLSS kick in the frame generation. And there you have it. We're now getting a steady 60 frames per second with amazing looking graphics. Now, DLSS does cause a bit of shimmer in the image, so we can just top this off with some temporal anti-aliasing, also known as TAA. And with our RTX 5090 at a comfortable 93% usage, look at those beautiful graphics we're getting here. This is truly the future. Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions, everyone. Yes, we're eventually going to complain about modern GPUs and poorly optimized graphics, but we do have a lot of good stuff to cover as well. We're bringing back an old tradition to the channel, and this is going to be our first year-end debrief in 8 years. That's right, from 2014 to 2017, right after the previous year's end, we would release a video that went over the VR milestones of the year, both for us and for the industry in general. But for many reasons we'll mention throughout this video, the tradition was discontinued in 2017. Now, first off, I want to apologize for the year-end debrief coming out this late, but I really felt like I needed the time to assemble this one properly so that we could take a healthy revival of the tradition back up while making sure the end product doesn't run over an hour and a half like it did in 2017. See, 2024 really hit hard in terms of VR, both for me and for my 2 YouTube channels. Thanks to a multitude of factors, an ambitious GPU upgrade and a massive leap in VR headsets with the entry of the Quest 3 in late 2023, last year was genuinely one of the most exciting for virtual reality in a long time, and thus, I just can't let 2024 slip by without some kind of recognition. Back in 2015, during the then year-end debrief series, I said the following. I think if I go back to 2014 and watch that video, that year-end video for 2014, I probably said that 2014 was my year of VR. Look, my 2014 self does not know any better. He's stupid, okay? Listen to my 2015 self, who is now speaking in 2016. 2015 is definitely, most definitely, my year of VR. And 2015 me is still correct. Yeah, listen, there's many reasons why 2016 and 2017 were also excellent years for me in VR, with 2016 being a year I clocked record times in VR, but 2015 remains special because it was the turning point, the year that I adapted to VR fully and moved to using virtual reality for gaming almost exclusively. The Oculus Rift DK2, while only giving out 960 by 1080 per eye, had just finally demonstrated the bare minimum you'd need in order to use VR as a consumer, rather than as an enthusiast or a developer. Games that I can point to as headlines of that year were Ark Survival Evolved, yes, Ark used to have fairly decent seated VR support, and Alien Isolation, which had launched with experimental Oculus Rift DK2 support, seated VR support that was surprisingly commercial grade for something that was apparently meant for a short demo. With all these big hit years behind us, how does 2024 measure up? Is this finally the year that beat out 2015, finally taking over the long-held title of my year of VR? Well, no. No, and I'll say it came close, but nothing can really touch the magic that was 2015, with all the first-time discoveries and the general transition from 3D screen gaming into full-out VR. However, 2024 will hold a very important place. Thanks to a few upgrades, a new workflow established with Stereo 3D Plays, the second channel, and especially thanks to the Quest 3, 2024 will go down in my VR history as my year of VR renaissance. It's in 2024 that I finally got my wheels going again, as there were so many things to get excited about, and the Quest 3 did not fail to impress me not only from the beginning, but consistently, over and over, relentlessly as the year went on. I have not been this excited about virtual reality since 2017, which speaks volumes on how very special 2024 has been. Sit back, grab a drink, make yourself something to eat. I'm going to take you through all the important milestones of 2024, and then I'll expand on a few of them. Notably, I'll give you my long-term impressions of the Quest 3, along with a few comments on current-day hardware. We'll recap the wireless VR saga, and I'll have some additional notes to make about that deep dive. I'll talk briefly about UEVR Injector, and finally we'll cover a few favorites in the list of titles I've played last year. First, of course, before we get to those, let's quickly recap how 2024 went down for our two channels. Dear viewers, I'm reporting to you directly from the North Pole with some unfortunate, tragic news about Santa Claus. See, at the North Pole, they have to get ready for the following Christmas months in advance. In fact, they start getting ready in January, as early as January. For example, Santa Claus this year was waiting for the drop of the NVIDIA Series 50 GPUs because he wanted to place an order for stock. And so when the GPUs were released just recently, he placed a really large order, to which NVIDIA replied by sending him 2 RTX 5080s and 1 RTX 5090, and nothing else. He ordered hundreds of cards. Santa finally snapped, and he snapped badly. I've been sent here to clean up the mess. He's killed all the elves. He started drinking, and he went on a downhill spiral. At which point he started just rampaging the entire place. And so, now we have to clean up the mess. Now, jokes aside, this is Viscera Cleanup Detail, Santa's Rampage, a game that I used to run through Vorpex in order to do commentary for the year-end debriefs, and I'm bringing it back in this video. It's going to be in the background with voiceover, but I wanted to check in from the game, so enjoy. While Stereo 3D Plays was launched in late 2022, it's only in late 2023 that I finally got the hang of the production flow between the two channels. And so by early 2024, that transition was finally complete, using content from the sister channel to help create more focused content for this channel. This was some really good timing because in November 2023, the Quest 3 finally made its entrance, and boy did it come in with a bang. The Quest 3 is really going to be the supporting theme of 2024. No, not everything amazing that happened was due to the headset, but almost everything was. Because of this machine, I must have experienced violent goosebumps at least once every 2 VR sessions. I think I can't credit any prior headset of even half that much. This new kit closed off 2023 on a positive note and just launched 2024 into orbit, pushing me to try more things that I have in years, getting me to create more content than I have in a very long time. Yes, it helped that in February I finally upgraded from an RTX 2080 Ti to an RTX 4080 because the need to run 9 million pixels per frame or more for the Quest 3 was starting to weigh heavily on the venerable but aging 2080 Ti. And so the new GPU really did help line up the performance with that massive resolution upgrade the Quest 3 requires. I'll give you my long-term impressions of the Quest 3 later in this video, so keep watching if you want to know what I think of it now. The next big milestone of the year was my discovery of Virtual Desktop and Steam Link, along with the wireless VR deep dive that took place throughout the spring and summer. With my primary wireless VR interface being AirLink since 2021, it was quite a leap to jump into a more potent interface like Virtual Desktop. I think back to my first session with it, where I'd accidentally left the resolution setting on godlike and I launched Resident Evil 7 only to find the game running decently, all while providing me the highest render resolution I had ever seen in virtual reality to date. The wireless VR research did have its ups and downs though, the strange limits of AirLink and the mediocre aspects of Steam Link, but in the end it was simply another exciting series of things to try, all things that helped confirm that virtual reality is still in fact progressing steadily. Take note, later in this video I'll have to revise Steam Link's score I had given in my final verdict in the original deep dive video on the subject. While the wireless VR deep dive took us down a journey of exploration and discovery, it also finally led me to trying out a tool I had been putting off for way too long. UEVR Injector finally made its debut, first on Stereo 3D Plays in the summer, and finally on Stereo 3D Productions just in time for Halloween with a guide for the game Visage. While UEVR Injector really pushes all the limits, it looks like the RTX 4080 is just enough to be able to do almost anything with this injector. Borderlands 3, Stray, High on Life, Pacific Drive, Alice's Lullaby, Visage. Not only did I storm through quite a few titles in a short span, but I started learning configurations more in depth, hoping to one day align the quality of my UEVR guides with that of my old Vorpex guides. Just like all the milestones in this segment, I'll expand on UEVR Injector later in this video. Finally, and this was less of a milestone and more something that went on all year, with the production workflow for Stereo 3D Plays and Stereo 3D Productions finally nailed down to the ground, I knew the production itself needed some overdue attention, and I decided to put a lot of focus on massive improvements, some that are still being tweaked as we speak today. It all started with the introduction of interpolation and stabilization on all our content. Gone are the days of ridiculously shaky footage. I mean, look at this. I used to release content like this. Since I introduced stabilization, even I can't watch this anymore. It's so goddamn shaky and uneven. Now look at the same shot with the new process. Yeah, this is day and night. Stabilization is king and it's here to stay. The second experiment done later in the year were the resolution upgrades. First, with advanced post-process AI upscaling that takes an eternity to run, we managed to introduce some fairly excellent looking 1440p and 4K adaptations of our videos. Furthermore, near year's end, we finally started upgrading the resolution at which we capture the gameplay, along with a bunch of tweaks to preserve more quality in the image. 2024 was the first time in years that so much focus was put on production, and may go down as the year with the most effort ever put, mostly thanks to the sister channel and the experiments I did there. This video right now is being produced in 4K, and I'm actually hoping to have all the videos on the big channel be at that resolution for the entirety of 2025. All things we can do now thanks to the advances made in 2024. So with all these factors combined, all somewhat heavily supported by the Quest 3 and the amazing RTX 4080 that allowed me to venture beyond the limits of reasonable performance, 2024 is one of my most active years when it comes to virtual reality, and definitely is the most active year since 2017. With all the amazing moments to which I reacted as if it were my first time doing VR again, 2024 is most definitely my year of VR renaissance. At Anus Tech Tips, we like to dig as deep as possible. And some of you might be asking me, Anus, can you try this Unreal Engine 6 demo out in virtual reality? Well, after a massive system upgrade, we've installed a 5,000 watt power supply unit in our main system to make sure there'd be plenty of power to go around for the RTX 5090. It's time to try and see if we can make this work in virtual reality through the Quest 3 with the power of DLSS and FrameGen. So I'm gonna go in the menu here and launch this, and it looks like it's launching. Wait. Oh, what happened? Wait, Oh no! We knocked out the city's power grid again! I swear, I almost only have positive things to say about the Quest 3. Literally the only negative thing I had to say in my review, along with a note that I would likely not have to deal with it again in a long while, went down as expected. This thing has not bothered me once about my Meta account since I bought it. I turn it on, I hop into PC VR, and I'm experiencing fucking awesomeness. I do not have any way to disembellish this. The things I said about the Quest 3 in my original review not only stand strong, but may actually be even better than originally described. After the whole year has passed, I can safely say that this is not only the best VR headset of all time, bar none, but this headset actually did outright justice on so many things I hated about the commercial launch of VR. Yeah, there's gonna be some angst in this segment, because while the Quest 3 did so many good things, I think those things should have been done 8 years ago, not in late 2023. No, I'm not talking about the resolution. That had to evolve naturally. I'm talking about almost everything else though. Rewind to 2016, where I excitedly opened the box to my first Oculus Rift CV1, the first commercially available VR headset ever, one that I had waited for years while trying out the dev kits. I remember how quickly my enthusiasm faded. In less than an hour, I found myself wiping the CV1 lenses constantly, wondering why they were fogging up so damn easily. Well past me, let me tell you a little story about shit-tier Fresnel lenses. They're going to ruin the industry and personally will jade you from VR for nearly a decade to come. 8 years to be specific. I'm not joking here, Fresnel lenses killed me. I immediately developed not only hatred for the CV1, but hatred for the Fresnel lenses trend in general. Now, the Quest 3 has pancake lenses. It's the first time since the Oculus DK2 that I own a headset with clear lenses, and holy crap, we have indeed been robbed of 8 years of good VR. These lenses are straight up revolutionary in a way that should have made sense 8 years ago. They don't scatter light, the glare is absolutely minimal, and the image projection is clear. I can see! I don't have any way to state it otherwise, and yes, I know other manufacturers did way better with Fresnel, notably HTC and Valve, but they still sucked in comparison to Pancake and truly downgraded the VR experience by critical levels. I'm standing by what I said in my original review of the Quest 3. I am never buying a VR headset with Fresnel lenses again. The dark ages of VR are over. I might revisit old headsets like the Index and the Quest 1 in the future, but I will literally have to force myself to do it as they are so infinitely inferior. You heard me say earlier in this video that I do think that resolution-wise, the Oculus Rift DK2 marked the absolute minimum resolution for regularly usable VR that goes beyond just experiment and development. However, that doesn't go without saying that we have for a long time always felt like we needed another upgrade. With the DK2, it wasn't hard to notice the screen door prominently. Later with the CV1 and the HTC Vive, it got a little better, partly thanks to those goddamn Fresnel lenses blurring the displays, and later with the Index and the Quest 2, we reached the point where the screen door looked more like a kind of faint grain in the image, but it still wasn't quite there. Finally, with the Quest 3, it's the first time that I simply cannot see pixels or evidence of a screen door effect or grain or anything of that sort. Now, almost all the imperfections you might spot all come from how your game is rendering and nothing else. It still positively, nutritiously destroys me to this very day. I just recently saw BioShock Infinite in VR for the first time in 8 years, and the ascent literally cut my breath for a good 2 minutes. I kept getting first-time moments in this thing. It's just incredible. Justice. I said the Quest 3 did VR justice in the way it's made. It's also because of a lot of small, dumb design choices, many that fortunately were not adapted by HTC and Valve, but sadly were used profusely by Oculus and some competitors. For example, the CV1 and the Quest 1 had this dumb, short-sighted design decision of having fabric between the lenses. Fabric that you cannot remove and that is extremely hard to clean. An absolutely disgusting, unhygienic design choice. The fabric would always eventually start fuzzing a bit from getting cleaned, and later you'd start having that fuzz tickle the tip of your nose while you try to concentrate on your VR. Hell, look at Pimax, one of the worst headset manufacturers I ever had the misfortune of crossing paths with in my life. Fresnel on steroids with the shitty fuzzy fabric between the eyes. Fortunately, Oculus gave up this vomit-inducing design at the Quest 2, opting for a solid plastic surface on the inside. But with the Quest 3, they went back to a flexible membrane, just this time it's made of what it should have been made in the first place. It's simply a form-fit rubber membrane that will perform its duty without ever interfering with your VR. No nasty dirt buildup, no wear, no infuriating tickle fuzz, just a smooth, continuous surface that flexes with the lenses for the IPD adjustment, one that is very easy to clean and just the way it should have been done 8 years ago. The outside of the CV1 and the Quest 1 was fabric. What the hell were they thinking at Oculus? Were they smoking opium when they worked on their headset design? In retrospect, I honestly think they wanted to make disposable VR and just didn't care about these obviously disgusting, unhygienic design choices that didn't even bring anything positive, not even a good look to the item. The face foam they gave us with the CV1 felt like concrete coated in sandpaper. I swear that Rift CV1 stock face foam was capable of peeling your skin in 15 minutes. It's like Oculus wanted you to blow $800 and shove the headset in a closet forever. I mean, come on, they completely stopped implementing any form of eye relief mechanism, which means for almost a decade Oculus were like, wear glasses? Well, fuck you in particular, haha! With the Quest 3, fabric gone, form factor good, facial interface great, eye relief back, justice. Understand that most of the idiotic design choices I mentioned here jaded me so heavily that over time, seeing a lot of these terrible aspects drag on from generation to generation slowly eroded my enthusiasm for virtual reality overall. I ended up in a spot where I didn't feel like I had anything to talk about at the end of the year, so I called off the Year End Debrief series in 2018. I'm so glad the Quest 3 was done the way it was done, because it effectively pulled me right back in one go, having set the record straight on so many stupid things that were done over the past 8 years. It's sadly not refreshing, it's overdue, but fortunately it may well have saved my enthusiasm for VR itself just in a nick of time. Justice. So much so, this even motivated me to bring back the year-end debriefs. I got almost everything I had with the Index, minus the shitty lenses, minus the wire in most cases, but also minus the excellent audio. I stand by this. I think the Index had the best audio system of any VR headset and still does today. No, the Quest 3's onboard audio is not bad, but I still admit it's not as good as the Index's. However, given the Quest 3 demolishes the Index at every single other aspect, resolution, optics, design, tracking, yes, by the way, Lighthouse tracking sucks and needs to die and I never want to use it again, I think I can settle on a slightly less potent audio system with the Quest 3. The Quest 3 may have been a major factor for 2024, but just like the Quest 2, this new headset is also capable of wireless VR, but with increased resolution and clarity, the need to improve the wireless VR stream quality became critical, which takes us to our next big milestone of 2024. My journey into wireless VR really began unexpectedly. This obviously doesn't mean I didn't plan to use wireless VR at all. In fact, it was going to become my primary go-to with the Quest 3, but I didn't expect to dive down the rabbit hole by jumping into 3 completely different wireless VR interfaces in the span of only a few months. Steam Link gave me an interesting enough introduction that I eventually decided to go into a deep dive with that tool, only to then realize that there were a lot of things I could simply accomplish better with Quest Link and AirLink. From a more consistent bitrate to a better encoder output and a smoother stream, AirLink clobbered Steam Link in every metric I threw at it. This eventually led me to not only make a showcase about Steam Link, but also start a deep dive into virtual desktop. I needed to know if all the hype about that interface was real, and sure enough, it didn't only clobber Steam Link, but it even handed AirLink its own ass. Eventually, after the entire wireless deep dive video was completed, I scored all the interfaces, and I'd like to take the opportunity to rectify a somewhat massive error. We're going to have to adjust Steam Link's score to reflect the impact of this mistake. See, normally with a wireless VR interface, a setting called encoder resolution refers to the resolution of the video stream sent to the headset. Virtual Desktop and AirLink both use similar terms. But Steam Link thought it would be cool to make the value encoder resolution size not mean what it's actually supposed to, which misled me and others into trying to raise this value as high as possible. This is not a good thing. It turns out that Steam Link uses a rather awesome form of sliced encoding, one that actually works with eye-tracking headsets, by the way. It encodes the center of your view at a higher bitrate than the outside edges. And this value, encoder resolution size, happens to be the size of the focus area of the sliced encoding, the high bitrate area. Now, the perk of this is great. You get more bitrate for the important stuff in the image. Remember, this is sliced encoding, not foveated rendering. So no, the resolution itself is not greater at the middle, just a bitrate. And the rest of the image is encoded at a much lower bitrate, this focusing quality where it matters. The caveat is, if you have to try to make the size of the high quality area too large, the encoder starts outright shitting itself. And this is where I have to revise the reliability score for Steam Link, because after doing a couple of tests, yeah, this tool works a lot better if you stick to encoder resolution size around 1200 to 1300, maybe even a notch less. And the visual loss is practically non-existent. If anything, there's a gain. So let's take a look at the original score sheet here, where Steam Link tanked with a score of 53 out of 100 because it was running like shit with maxed out encoder resolution size values, as me and many others thought that this setting was indeed the total resolution size of the VR stream sent to the headset. With this proper configuration, where we keep encoder resolution size at or around 1300, Steam Link suddenly starts running much smoother. Reliability, like this, goes to a 7, which suddenly puts it on par with AirLink in that metric. Yeah, once you know that the value that's supposed to mean something doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean, hey, this thing is running a lot better. I did say originally that I would appreciate Steam Link more if only it didn't both look and run like shit. I can take one or the other, but not both at the same time. And it looks like that's what's finally happened here. I can finally respect this interface a little bit more. Now, what happened to the image? Well, yes, the image quality does go up because when you focus most of the stream's bitrate on a smaller area like we've done here, there's noticeable gain. However, hold your horses. First, I don't know why, but this encoder sucks. There's always more artifacts than with any other solution I've tried to date. Steam Link has a codec limitation because it's still not up to par even with mid-level AirLink configurations. Also, notice how encoder resolution size is a fixed value, but the overall encoder resolution isn't exposed at all? If encoder resolution size represents the size of the high-quality area of the image, should it not be a percentage rather than a fixed pixel value, along with another option to actually adjust the encoder's actual resolution? Look, what I'm trying to get at here is I still highly suspect that this stream's resolution is not even at a 1-to-1 with the Quest 3's native resolution. It looks like something that's more around 90% of the way there, and it's very noticeable. And this still squanders the quality of any large render resolution settings you may be trying. Why render at 200% if the interface is only sending over a 90% resolution stream? Either way, image quality only goes up by a point to a 6 out of 10 because indeed, with less aggressive focus size, the foveated encoder does a much better job of the high bitrate area. With these revised scores, Steam Link jumps an entire 10 points and finally scores a 63%. Which is still a good deal away from AirLink, but I will admit, now that it doesn't stutter like crap anymore with a proper configuration, I can actually start respecting this thing a little more. I just hope some work is done on the codec and encoder side, because it's still pretty dire. In hindsight, I also have one regret about Virtual Desktop. I have never really demonstrated VDXR even though I have used it in the past, and it's not mentioned in my wireless VR showcase, maybe the biggest missing element in that video. VDXR is effectively a virtual desktop native runtime that handles all OpenXR-enabled games. This completely eliminates the overhead of having to use Steam VR and will really perform superior to other configurations. If you aren't recording content or are fine with using the OBS OpenXR plugin, then by all means, please make sure to have Virtual Desktop use VDXR for OpenXR titles. It's just so much more efficient and a great feature of this wireless interface. The success of the wireless VR showcase was just as unexpected as its creation. I really made a lot of discoveries through this journey, and it was one of the things that drove me to try more and more VR alongside the awesome elements the Quest 3 had to offer. While I was digging through the wireless VR interfaces, which required me to try tons of different VR simulations, I decided to tap into a wealth of VR content that I had been ignoring for far too long. UEVR Injector, the next big milestone of the year, a Pandora's box that I finally cracked open in June of 2024. Before I tried UEVR Injector, I had known about it for a while, but I'll be honest, I was terrified of it. See, on this channel, when I use something like an injector, I compulsively have to show how I got said injector working. I got burned so much back in the early days of VR, seeing creators make videos of themselves playing games that don't support VR, in VR, without showing how they got it done. It bothered me so much I vowed never to do that to others myself. So if I'm gonna try UEVR Injector, I know I probably have to somewhat dive deeper into it. And sure, on the surface level it's not complicated, but in depth, UEVR Injector is not unlike having to relearn Vorpex from scratch. Speaking of surface level, that's basically where I started. I heard a lot of news that Borderlands 3 was finally portable into a full VR adaptation with motion controls, one very similar in quality to that of the official VR port of Borderlands 2 VR, but with the added perk of co-op multiplayer. So I jumped into that first, and honestly, other than adjusting my runtimes a little bit when it came to the injector itself, I literally had nothing to do. Unlike Vorpex, UEVR, being a single engine injector, has the advantage of using values that are common to most Unreal Engine games, and so eliminates the need to adjust things like head tracking, field of view, and other basic aspects of the VR simulation. UEVR Injector has the game's interface directly with the VR runtimes instead of forwarding frames like Vorpex does, so everything from rendering to tracking is fully handled like a native VR game rather than an injector adaptation. The Borderlands 3 VR scenario demonstrates this very well. The game is forgiving with performance, the mechanics work to near perfection, and it really does compare to its native VR counterpart in Borderlands 2 VR. It didn't take me long to get the hang of the intermediate features either. When I first tried Stray, I actually learned a lot about camera attachments and the input settings. I even started making myself a custom configuration in Alice's Lullaby, one that I'm going to continue working on in the near future to improve my knowledge of UEVR Injector and learn how to create more complex configurations from scratch. I'm hoping to be able to adapt Alice's Lullaby to a quasi-motion controller 6 Degrees of Freedom-like title. Now, there is one big limitation. Performance demand with UEVR Injector is often downright unreasonable. And I'll tell you, after running a few tests, I figured out that UEVR itself doesn't really apply any overhead to games. Maybe at most 10%, usually less than 5%. The big stumbling block is Unreal Engine itself, especially Unreal Engine 5. It turns out that most games built on that engine even have performance issues on the desktop, with Borderlands 3 struggling to keep 60 frames per second at 4K on a 2080 Ti. It's only normal that these games bring even the most powerful systems to their knees, as with VR you're asking 6 to 12 megapixels per frame from it, that being 3 to 6K, at frame rates between 72 and 120 per second. Yeah, there isn't much to blame UEVR itself for. This entirely falls on the engine and its increasingly poor optimizations and concerning reliance on image mutilating upscalers like DLSS or FSR. Honestly, despite all that, I'll say it, I love UEVR Injector. It brings so much to the table in one shot because there are tons of games that will work perfectly with this thing. No need to set up field of view and head tracking, no need to adjust complex parameters unless you're trying to create a motion controls profile for an unsupported game. Making a seated profile is practically plug and play and done in one shot. If you pick up a game profile from the Flat2VR Discord forum for UEVR Injector, you can bet the setup should be easy and should work right out of the box at the first go. All I really wish we had now is, and I really hope this happens, UEVR needs to support Unreal Engine 3 games. Not only would this unlock a new performance tier for those on mid-end hardware, but it will also unleash a flood of classics that could now all be played in VR. Imagine BioShock Infinite with a full UEVR retrofit, going directly through the runtimes, no middleman. Yeah, I restarted my Vorpex playthrough of BioShock Infinite recently, and I am absolutely loving it. I cannot stress how impactful that experience is to me right now. But if UEVR could handle that game, I would immediately make the leap over to it, because with that crazy movement, that game has to be an absolute thrill with room scale VR. It's interesting how many discoveries I made with UEVR Injector through 2024, enough so that while thinking about what were my VR favorites of 2024, 2 UEVR Injector-driven titles made their way on the list because they were just as good as a native VR adaptation. And this takes us to our next segment where we'll go over our favorites of the year. Oh my god. It's fucking Rudolph. Who wants some ribs? Like, who wants some Rudolph ribs? Jesus Christ, man. Originally, in the Year End Debrief series, I would actually compile a top 5 or top 10 VR games list. In fact, at one point, I was even compiling a separate list for third-party VR adaptations like mods or Vorpex titles. Now, I considered doing this in this reboot of the tradition, but where do I even start? Do I wipe the last 8 years I haven't done this and start from scratch? Do I just stick to what I did this year? Man, I honestly cannot be doing the former. We are going to be here for 3 weeks of non-stop video, and I vowed to try to make these year-end debriefs more brief, haha, and so I decided to approach this segment in a different format. I'm not going to rank anything. I'm definitely not going back 8 years to dig through all my favorites. I'm just going to summarize what were my favorites of the year. Whether this be a whole game or just a moment experienced in a given game, we'll go over these without really weighing them against one another. Now, I will split a couple of entries out of the main favorites because these two are as old as VR is, but I happen to have played both a lot in 2024 and I truly, thoroughly enjoyed every minute, so I think I need to make them honorable mentions. First mention is going to be in the really obvious type, Fallout 4 VR. It's ancient, I play it without mods, it's been dragging on this channel since 2017, and I honestly couldn't care less. I fucking love this game. Over the years, not only did it kind of set up what I see as motion control standards, I don't like games with gesture controls and physical interactions like Boneworks. I much prefer simplified inputs with most of your actions working through buttons, just like this game. But it also managed to keep me completely hooked. The high point for me with Fallout 4 VR this year was the trip through the glowing sea, which was so thrilling my hands were trembling the entire playthrough. Since that point, I've ramped up the efforts to finish up the main story and played more than I have the last 5 years combined. And I do plan on finally finishing the game this year, but it's almost certain that finishing the game won't take it off my channels because I am guaranteed to return to it after for other experiments and specific playthroughs. The other honorable mention for 2024 is a game that I had to revisit for Quest 3 research, then for the production of an updated guide for RE Framework, the tool that lets you play this game in VR, and later wireless VR experiments. I went back into Resident Evil 7, and despite having finished the main campaign 3 years ago, I could not put the damn game down. This thing looks like goddamn reality in the Quest 3. The pancake lenses of that headset don't scatter high contrast horror visuals. Your lighter doesn't blow out god rays. It's crisp, it's clear, and it's just you and the game. The End of Zoe DLC in RE7 may be the best surprise of the year. No, I don't like VR Melee, and yes, I don't see how a mod can retrofit such a mechanic in a primarily pancake game that has never had native motion controller support. But holy crap, RE Framework proved me completely wrong. I'm strongly considering starting a proper series on this game in 2025. Stay tuned. With the honorable mentions out of the way, it's now time to go over my favorites of 2024. I tried out quite a few new things this year between native VR, mods, and UEVR Injector, and some of those games made quite a mark. Either they left me with one impactful moment, or the whole thing was simply Hall of Fame worthy right off the bat. Whatever the reason is, if it was new to me and it left a mark, it's made its way on this list. The first favorite of 2024 I have to bring up is Borderlands 3. Man, when I first set up UEVR Injector, I had a blank slate, no expectations, maybe tons of worry from my past experiences with Vorpex and knowing that retrofits are never perfect, but I just didn't expect to jump into an adaptation that's nearly as good as Borderlands 2 VR. Remember, this isn't even a mod, it's a bloody injector, and it actually measures up to an adaptation made by the studio themselves. With good performance, considering UEVR Injector, excellent motion controller adaptation, the same fluid, fun mechanics of Borderlands 2 VR, minus the slow time feature and plus multiplayer co-op, I'll never understand why Borderlands 2 VR was nerfed not to have co-op. Borderlands 3 through UEVR Injector with the official UEVR profile is an absolute blast that cannot be looked over. If you have a GPU equivalent to an RTX 4070 or above and really like the notion of Borderlands in VR, this is a must for you. The next favorite of the year isn't necessarily here because of the gameplay or because of my overall impression of the game. It's here because it blew my mind, ripped my brain in half, from the very get-go in that old house at the beginning. Resident Evil 8 takes everything that makes all the other new Resident Evil games look so great in VR and just cranks everything up by a factor of 10. I've never, and I mean never, seen something look so realistic while never looking like an upscaled temporal smearing mess. Resident Evil 8, turn after turn, showed me the best VR graphics I've ever seen in my life, and I haven't even gotten to the castle yet. Now, this goes without saying that at this point, I'm sure I won't like this game anywhere near as much as Resident Evil 7. I already didn't like the way it opens, a bit a la Resident Evil 4 with the town-wide brawl, but I will go back to it and endure this because I need to see more visuals. Resident Evil 8 is going to be back in 2025, and I should eventually be putting a guide together for it, because in 2024 it left a mark and I simply will never forget it. Next favorite of 2024 is a game that I simply never expected would exist. After finishing Albino Lullaby in 2017, so much time went by that I completely forgot the ultimate goal was for this game to become an episodic series. Out of absolutely nowhere in late 2024, Alice's Lullaby, Albino Lullaby Episode 2, to my immense surprise, was released to very positive reactions. However, there was something missing: VR support. Yeah, it looks like this time around the devs didn't quite have the time to even slap in some bare-bone experimental type VR support. But this time around, we had UEVR Injector. Sure enough, UEVR easily made this game work almost identically to its predecessor in VR. With improved visuals, storytelling, and gameplay of Alice's Lullaby, the whole experience was simply mind-bending. It's great to be back in these insane, crayon-drawn, eclectic colored environments with these unsettlingly crazy characters. Yes, by the way, I plan on getting back to this game and possibly adapting a motion control enabled profile for it, because right now it's only suited VR with gamepad or mouse and keyboard, so stay tuned as this adaptation is likely about to improve even more in 2025. When October rolled around, I wanted to shift the main channel over into Halloween mode, and this meant finally getting back into first-party native VR titles. I went into Madison VR with very few expectations, and sure enough, after only a few minutes in that game, I got dragged into its madness. Yes, there were a few issues at the start, notably one softlock that I documented in my video, but once it got going, it never looked back. It had been a long time that a game hadn't gone full-out screams from me. I've done my good share of VR horror, and it's gotten tough to get to me, so having Madison get me regularly jolting and cursing was a refreshing return to form for good horror. Virtual reality is an extremely important medium for horror games. It's the content that gets the most augmented by the tech, as it eliminates the degree of separation you have between you and the screen and locks you into the game's world with seemingly no escape. Madison took full advantage of this and scared the absolute crap out of me. There's one more favorite for 2024, and this is something I ended up trying right at the very end. After trying to ignore it due to mixed reviews, I just simply couldn't look away anymore. Metro Awakening went on sale and I decided, screw it, I'm gonna gamble. And sure enough, I'm glad I did. Yes, by the way, the game has issues. First, it is a victim of Unreal Engine 5's criminally poor performance, but in this case, there is a configuration that works very well. Hint, it's not the default setting they insultingly present you with that is so low quality, you won't even be able to read the end-user license agreement at the very first screen on the Quest 3, and should be able to scale to most headsets and systems. And once you get past that, Metro Awakening has a lot to show, and all of it is incredibly well polished and visually stunning. I'll admit I haven't gotten to very much gameplay yet, but just on the merit of its opening sequences, I have to say this was another one of these games that gave me goosebumps on multiple occasions just based on how visually rich and insanely immersive the environments and the characters were. Metro Awakening is not in fact as bad as general reviews suggest. It also is possible to get it running quite decently on older hardware without getting Vaseline-coated visuals. Seriously, Vertigo, do something about those default settings and that anti-aliasing. It really tarnishes your good game. 2024 was a huge year for me in terms of VR. Just on the fact that I've played enough things to even list my favorites of the year speaks volumes. Having the boundaries pushed further and further, week after week, really motivated me to try as many things as possible, and it's nice to finally run into a new series of VR favorites. Now I need to know, and note, this is not to artificially spur interactions, I am actually curious to know what your favorites of the year were. Not just because I want to see who enjoyed the same thing I did, but just because if you bring up something I personally haven't tried, you'll be giving me a reason to check it out. So yeah, what was your favorite VR experience of 2024? At Anus Tech Tips, when we reach the bottom, we still try to force our way in some more. That's right, last time we tried running this Unreal Engine 6 demo in virtual reality, we took out half the city's power grid and they weren't too happy about that. But fortunately, we have a backup solution, thanks to our good friends at NVIDIA. NVIDIA have shipped us the brand new RTX 5090 DE, and it's equipped with a very special feature designed for just this kind of situation. See, the NVIDIA RTX 5090 DE has its own fuel generator. The letters DE stand for Diesel Edition. This GPU can be run outside and doesn't require any grid power, supplying itself entirely off its own generator. Not only is this completely autonomous, but it packs 15% more processing power than the standard RTX 5090. The RTX 5090 is running right now, and I know it's loud, but that's a small price to pay in order to be able to see the future of graphics in virtual reality. Now, I'm not gonna stall any longer. I'm gonna go ahead and put on the Quest 3, and we're gonna get this started once again. Hopefully this time it works. So I'm going ahead and I'm gonna launch it. It's going, and oh, wait! You gotta be kidding me! Oh no! Oh shit! The RTX 5090 is on fire! I never expected my channels to pick up production back to a level like we did in 2024. I didn't expect I would ever see the VR industry, the headset manufacturers specifically, maybe Meta more than anyone else, finally wake up and correct the idiotic inbred genes that were introduced into the hardware back in 2016 at the commercial launch. Visually mutilating Fisher-Price tier Fresnel lenses, uncomfortable headset designs, poor facial interfaces, stupid aesthetic features. It's like all that instantly vanished at the end of 2023, and now I'm left with just the common sense. The Quest 3 delivered me the sharpest, clearest, most comfortable VR I've had in my entire life, and it became a motivating factor to do more and more. I've never had a moment in time where trying things in VR gave me a 1 in 3 chances of massive goosebumps. The VR this year was so good that most of it came with actual emotional payload. Hell, even a whole year down the line in early 2025, it's still happening, as my return to BioShock Infinite reached a point where it literally caught my breath for 2 minutes, completely knocked the wind out of me. It looks like the trend that started in 2024 is nowhere near reaching its end, and I'm ready for more. As long as this lasts, I'm going to take in all I can get. That brings us to our conclusion, where I need to ask, what's in store for the future? Well, for the time being, there's going to be a whole lot more awesomeness, first-time experiences, and other returns to absolute classics, but further down the line, I'm not sure. There's a big problem in the industry right now where GPU manufacturers have decided to use their consumers as pure capital, falsely advertising the weakest line of GPUs in the history of time as being a lot more powerful than they really are. We've reached a point where graphics programmers are destroying developers' ability to optimize their games and are now relying on disgusting, image-mutilating upscalers and abhorrent frame-gen tech to compensate for the fact that they cannot make an engine that runs over 5 frames per second at 720p on an RTX 5090 anymore. I don't know where we're going on the long term, and I hope something changes this year, because when I find myself in a situation that is as good as the one I'm in now with VR, I always worry, is this the peak? Well, I don't think so. And fortunately, all this fiasco is happening at a moment where I find that the 3rd generation VR headset's resolutions have gotten so big. For Christ's sake, the big screen beyond and the Quest 3 eat at least 9 million pixels per frame, twice what the Index used to consume. And if you want the optimal look, you're going to want to aim higher, around the 12 million pixels per frame mark. Right now, only the high-end GPUs can satisfy this demand, and there's even scenarios you'll run into where no GPU in existence can satisfy. Edge cases like UEVR Injector, or trying to run Metro Awakening on absolute maxed out settings. And so I surmise that at least for the next few years, GPUs will have to catch up with VR headset resolutions, while the headsets themselves evolve in other ways than display upgrades, while the rest of the tech can catch up. And this is a really good point for this to happen at, because like I said, the pixel density we've reached now really marks the point where we can finally be fully satisfied that we don't perceive the existence of pixels anymore in our view. Raising that density one more time is not an urgent need and might not happen for another while, which should in turn give GPU manufacturers time to sort out the situation they're in. Hopefully over the next few years a better balance forms between the need to use horrendous image upscalers and the ability to render graphics natively and display them by the pixels as they are meant to be. Hopefully enough time goes by for frame gen to die. Yeah, there's nothing good to take away from frame gen, it just needs to die and never return. I'll accept some upscaling to some degrees, but shove that frame gen tech up your ass as far as it can go without coming out the other side, and give us games that can run at full rate. On a more positive side, Meta have recently released the Quest 3S, a lower tier, more entry-level, cheaper headset with the Quest 2 displays and lenses, along with some of the Quest 3's new hardware. And yeah, put the old Fresnel lenses having returned in this one, I'm still noting this as a positive. We need a cheaper entry-level headset, and I'll double down on Meta's effort. They should have released a model with an even lower resolution, using the Quest 1 displays. Yep, the biggest barrier to entry is performance, and the best way to ease that on a budget is by not having a high-resolution demand. I think it would be awesome to have a model that aims 1440 by 1600 per eye, like the Index or the Quest 1, and it would greatly help PC gamers with existing mid-end systems enter the market and do pretty much anything they want in VR, even on a GPU like a 4060. While it's not that big of a step down over the Quest 3, I still think the Quest 3S is a good idea and a step in the right direction. For me, 2025 started off with a bang. I've already started doing more first impressions videos than ever, this time using the sister channel Stereo 3D Plays to publish them. I've also returned to OG classics, notably rebooting my Let's Play series of BioShock Infinite, and from the looks of things I have a lot more on my plate I can get to, tons of things I need to revisit, but more importantly another slew of entirely new things to try and bring to light on either Stereo 3D Plays or Stereo 3D Productions, or both. That's it for this 2024 year-end debrief on Stereo 3D Productions. 2024 was truly my year of VR renaissance, and I hope 2025 works its way to getting a title of its own, because I sure as hell would like enough motivation to make another year-end debrief video next year. Also, again, I want to apologize for how late this video came out, being a retrospective on 2024. I find that gaming media in general make their versions of year-end debriefs more for investors and less for the consumers. One indication of this is that they don't even wait for the year to be complete. Rather, they release their year-end content just before the holidays so they can sell more games. I don't like to do that. I do my year-end stuff after the year I'm reviewing has, well, actually been completed. This pushed production quite a bit since I wanted to take a more calculated approach than in the original series of debriefs, and so this video ended up taking ages to make. Not to mention, my excellent, now 23-year-old condenser microphone broke for good during production, so I had to urgently get a new one. I hope this was worth it, I hope you enjoyed, and I certainly hope it didn't come out too late for you. And on that note, thanks for watching all the way through, that's all I got for you tonight. I'll see you next time.